Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Spoken Word. I'm Jeremiah, and today I actually want to watch a video with you, or a video of a testimony that was done by Jackie Hill Perry. When I watched it, I actually thought that it was a very powerful testimony, a testimony of how God delivered her from a lifestyle of homosexuality. In my opinion, it's one of the best breakdowns or explanations of how the things you experience as a child can affect the lifestyle that you live as an adult, which is very similar to the video I just did talking about that. I want to thank Jackie Perry personally for sharing her testimony with the world, because there are so many who need to hear it. The video we're about to watch is from 2 years ago, but I'm sure that she gave the testimony actually prior than that. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get into this video. Again, this is Jackie Hill Perry talking about how God delivered her from a homosexual lifestyle. Let's get into it.
I was born June 21st, 1989, and I was born in a single parent household. I think that already kind of established a bit of confusion in me, just because I didn't have a father figure. My dad was very inconsistent. He would come into my life in seasons and then come out of my life. And so my entire framework of men for a long time was that men were not to be trusted, that men said things that they did not believe, that men did things that they did not really want to do, specifically when it related to me. I was introduced to pornography around the age of 5 or 6, and I was molested around the age of 7. So you have to understand that now I'm not only fatherless, but I'm also being introduced to sexuality in its perverted form. I'm being introduced to sexuality in a way that makes it seem as if sexuality is to be outside of marriage, but also that it means that it's to be an objectifying thing, that it has no dignity attached, that it has nothing to do with glory, and it has nothing to do with Jesus. It's just people doing what they want to do. And so I'm already having kind of a confused perspective when it comes to sex itself. I think that's why our generation, or millennials, if you will, I think that's why we're kind of jacked up now, is because we have been introduced to sexuality in a distorted form. And so now when people tell us that sex is beautiful within marriage between one man and one woman, it sounds confusing. It doesn't sound as beautiful because that wasn't the original way we learned about it in the first place. And so that's where I came from. Growing up, I also had gender confusion. So I felt in myself that I wasn't supposed to be a woman. It felt as if this body was not my own. It felt like this body was a bit strange. I felt more comfortable being in masculine positions and doing masculine things. And honestly, to be frank, I believe the culture has assisted us in this kind of confusion, because for too long it has made femininity and masculinity things that are not biblical. For somebody like me who doesn't like pink, who doesn't wear purses because I don't like extra baggage, I would prefer to have my debit card and my phone in my back pocket. I have been told growing up that made me a tomboy, that made me less than feminine. And so now when people start to question themselves, what they're questioning is things that wasn't even non-feminine in the first place. And so I was confused. And so I went to church with my aunt. My mother is not a believer, and so I didn't go to church with her, but I went to church with my aunt every weekend who was. And the thing about my aunt that was crazy is that it was just weird Christians are weird. I'm sure y'all know that. Jesus was writing on the ground, while people was telling people to stone people. It's like, why are you writing on the ground, bro? Like, what are you doing? My aunt was a clear contrast to my mother. And I remember there were 2 situations where I saw how Jesus makes people different. The first situation was we were at a thrift store because she really loved thrifting. And this lady, I guess, cut her off. Something happened in traffic where the lady got mad at my aunt, and she just started to cuss my aunt clean out. My aunt, just this sweet lady with like a dress down to her ankles that listened to gospel all the time. She's just like, God bless you, God bless you, God bless you. And she meant it. And I was so confused. I'm like, this lady is talking to you crazy, and you just talk about some God bless. You need to curse her out too. I don't understand how you just gonna let somebody disrespect you. But Jesus had changed her. The second situation was, I remember I would be at our home and she would be singing the Psalms. And as a 6-year-old, I'm like, why are you singing a song that doesn't rhyme? I don't really understand how, like, nothing connects. It's just you and Jesus. But to me, it was a distinctive difference between how she lived her life and how I saw my mother live her life. Where to me, it began to do something in my own conscience and in my own heart where it's like, man, God really does make people different. He really does change people.
She said that she had 2 examples in front of her that she could follow. So she could follow her mother, who was not a believer, or she could follow the example of her aunt, who was. As a believer, we just have to show them that there is another choice. Because how can they choose him if the one who knows him, which is us, doesn't talk about him? Just something to think about.
But while being in church, I still had these affections for same-sex or these same-sex desires. I still felt in and of myself that I was not who I thought I was supposed to be. But the way they talked about my struggles from the pulpit made me feel like I wasn't too free to confess that. It seemed as if it was discussed in such a way where if I was to be open about how I felt, that it would be met with stones and not grace. It felt as if the church was not a safe place for me to be free about how my mind was thinking and how my soul felt. It felt as if I was a leper. It felt as if hell must have had a special place for me specifically. Like, that's how I felt. Like, I'm gonna go straight to hell and they just gonna have a VIP just for Jackie Hill Perry right there. But I think God was faithful in developing my conscience in such a way that though the church may not have met my feelings in a way that felt safe, I still felt as if how I felt wasn't clearly right.
I'm so glad that she's saying these things because there has to be an accountability for those of us who are in the church. We have to be more responsible with how we speak to those we desire to save, and to be wise in how we address the topics that people are struggling with. Because if a safe space isn't created, they will always struggle to come and find help. And if they don't feel comfortable enough to talk to us in the church, then why would they ever feel free? Or why would they feel that they need to even come to church at all? Think about how it is when you go to the doctor. You go because there's a problem. The doctor assesses the problem and then lets you know what is needed to improve your current situation. If you follow their advice, it should get better. But if you disagree or disregard it, normally it will lead to more issues down the line, right? Their job isn't to force you to change. I want you to think about that. The doctor's job is not to force you to change or accept what they say. Their job is to provide you with the help based on the knowledge that they currently have. Knowledge that you don't have or possess, or you wouldn't be in a doctor's office, would you? Because we know Christ and have the knowledge of Christ, we're supposed to approach those who come for help the same way as the doctor does. It's just that simple. Let's get back into it.
So high school comes, that's when I got completely ratchet. I think high school, if you don't have the Holy Spirit, high school just turns you into somebody else. High school, I just started doing what I wanted to do, started to become incredibly rebellious. I still am a rebel. I just try to submit that under Jesus. But I'm just not a fan of authority. I'm just not a fan of people telling me what to do. I was so bad. Please don't follow my lead, but I was so bad to the point that my freshman year, my teacher would hand me the paper, I would sign my name and give it back to her. And she was like, "You didn't do anything." I signed my name. Like, you didn't, I don't get an A for effort. Like, I just thought like she should give me a sticker or something. And so I was just a terrible student. I was a terrible person. High school dance, I was 17. This young lady that I knew from middle school, she came up to me and she asked me if I would be her girlfriend. By this time, no one had ever known that I was same-sex attracted because in that season of my life, it wasn't a cool thing to do. And so nobody had known. So she asked if I could be her girlfriend. And I was just like, girl, that is really gay. Like, you need to get out of my face. Because I had to like front, and act like that's not what I was with. But when I went home, I could not get her question out of my mind. And I sat at home and I started to wrestle with her invitation. And I started to ask myself, Jackie, like, you've been wanting to do this for a long time. You've been feeling these desires since you were 5, since you were 6. Like, why not do it now? And so I got on MySpace. I don't know if y'all remember that anymore. That's when Tom was cool. I got on MySpace. Does it even exist? Is it alive? He probably works for Zuckerberg or something, I'm sure. That's the Facebook guy. I got on MySpace and I messaged her and we entered into a relationship that lasted maybe 6.5 days. After that relationship, if you want to call it that, I called this guy because in my mind, I'm like, okay, God doesn't like gay people, so let me just try to be straight. So I called this dude because, yeah, I did. And I remember kissing him. And it felt like every attraction I had for a guy had left. It felt like it wasn't natural. It felt like it wasn't normal. So I made up in my mind that it must be that I am supposed to be gay. So what did I do? I got back on MySpace. And I got into a relationship with one young lady who I was with for 2 years. In that relationship is when I transitioned into the role of a stud. So in the Black community, a stud is the lesbian female that dresses typically in masculine apparel. She typically is the domineering voice in the relationship. She plays the male, et cetera, et cetera. I think in white communities, sometimes it's called butch. And so that's what I was. In that world, I had boxers, I sagged my pants, I wore sports bras that would flatten my chest so that you couldn't see it. At that time, I had long hair, so I would just put my hair back in a ponytail. I was never bold enough to do a low cut. I was a bit scared of how I would look with short hair. And so that's what I was. I was going to gay clubs, going to gay pride parades, engaging in that lifestyle to the fullest extent that I could. But while I was in it, the interesting thing is there was this kind of dichotomy of having fun, but not having joy. And I couldn't really figure out the difference between the two because I was enjoying myself. I loved my girlfriend. I loved my friends. I felt like what I was doing was who I was, but at the same time, I could not get a hold of peace. And I didn't necessarily know how to because I felt like Christianity was just a bunch of dutiful people. Like they just seemed, I used to go to church and everybody just seemed unhappy. I was just like, why are these people so mad all the time? Like I just didn't want to be that. And I didn't want to wear long dresses and just listen to only gospel. Like I just felt like that was what Christianity was. I had never known that Christianity was Jesus. I had never known that Christianity was relationship. I had never known that salvation was a supernatural work of the Spirit of God.
Hey, real quick, because you probably missed it, right? Her testimony is a reminder to us that it all starts with the seed being planted. Because of what she had already experienced at the age of 5 and 6, it allowed a simple suggestion of will you be my girlfriend to grow into no longer seeing a man as desirable at all. And then that led her to being in a relationship for 2 years with the woman. When a seed is planted, it has to be dug up and thrown away. Because if you don't rebuke it and enough time is given, eventually that seed will begin to grow roots. And then a stem. And then leaves. And guess what? What you once thought wasn't an issue has now become something that you can no longer control. And that's why you have to completely rebuke it and remove the seeds that the enemy is trying to plant. This is good.
So I'm in this lifestyle, I'm doing me. The interesting thing is a Christian never spoke to me while I was in it. When I would be around Christians, they would actually look past me. They would look through me. They wouldn't look at me. They wouldn't talk to me. They would ignore me. And I'm not sure why. I can't judge their motives, but I think it could be 2 things. 3 things. It could be fear. Fear of how I would respond to them if they told me about Jesus. I think another thing could have been self-righteousness, is that they assumed that my sin deserved more hell than their self-righteousness did. I think another thing could have been just indifference, no concern for how God was seeing me in that moment. But the thing was, God was faithful to continue to work on me. So my convictions Just would not let up. I think that's the thing about when you kind of grow up in church, is that you know too much to be able to do things without conviction. And so I knew a lot about God, so my convictions would not wane, and I didn't like it. I would be at the club, and I'm just like, I don't understand why I'm thinking about Jesus right now. I just really wish this would go away. So I called my cousin. My cousin was the only believer that I knew who would not quote Revelations as soon as we got on the phone. I don't know if you know any of those kinds of saints that just won't tell you about hell every time y'all get on the phone. You know you're going to hell, right? I didn't. She wasn't one of those. She would actually have a conversation with me, ask me about my day. And so I called her, and I was like, Keisha, I feel like God is calling me, but I really don't want him. I don't want God. Like, I'm enjoying my life. I'm having fun. I'm like chilling. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could really do without him. And she told me, she was like, God is going to show you how much you need him. I wish she didn't say that, because my life just became real bad. It just got hectic. So I'm going to just say this briefly. So my dad died. That was sucky. And then I got some money from him dying, and being the fool that I am, got on eBay and bought a car. Don't ever buy a car on eBay, okay? Just don't do it. So I got on eBay, bought a car, had that car for about 4 weeks, and then it got towed. Didn't have enough money to get it out the tow shop, and then I got arrested because I used to steal. And so it just was terrible. Like, it was just like my life was just becoming ridiculous. And it felt like God was just making my life horrible for me to take notice of his goodness, for me to pay attention to him. And I think it's a mercy, because there are some people who are living wicked lifestyles, and they are in lives full of prosperity where they don't even have the opportunity to pay attention to God. And so I think that my life being a little bit hard was God's goodness towards me. October 2008, I'm 19. And I'm in my bed. I wasn't at a church. I wasn't at a conference. There was no altar. Once again, I wasn't going to church. And I was in my bed. I was probably watching Making the Band or something really irrelevant. And I felt God speak to my heart and say that the girl that I was with would be the death of me. It was deep, because I felt as if he wasn't just saying that lesbianism would be the death of me, but that my life would be the death of me. I think a lot of times when we have this conversation about homosexuality, one thing we forget is that homosexuality is only a piece of the problem. I'll explain. One time, when my testimony came out, this girl, she messaged me, and she went off on me and saying that I was being judgmental, being bigoted, et cetera, and that God was okay with her lifestyle. And I asked her, I said, if lesbianism wasn't even an issue for you, would God still be pleased with your life? Would you still be reckoned holy and righteous? And she said, no. That question, what it does is it identifies that lesbianism is not, or homosexuality is not the main problem. The problem is sin. Sin is the problem. Homosexuality is a leaf on a tree of sins. And so on that tree, you might have liar, you might have lustful, you might have pride, you might have unrighteous anger. But what needs to be dealt with is not plucking off one sin. That's why you have some people that say, I asked God to make me straight and he didn't. The problem is you asked God to save you from one thing and not to save you from all of you. That was the problem. And so what needs to happen is that God needs to get a hold of the root. God needs to get to the root of the tree, change the tree through regeneration and sanctification and salvation, so that the leaves now will bear fruit, where you will see joy and peace and self-control and all of the things that the fruit of the Spirit will produce. And so in me, I noticed that I had a big issue with the Lord. So
I'm sorry. She's saying it so well that I didn't want to stop it. And I'm sorry that I stopped it. Didn't I just say that we have to deal with the root? Listen to what she's saying. Most people today are focusing on the leaves when the root is the issue. The leaves represent sin, homosexuality, stealing, lying, fornication, adultery, idolatry. But these things are not the root issue. They are the result of what the root has experienced. If the root isn't planted in good soil, then it doesn't receive what it needs to grow strong. Any good planter knows that in order for a plant to survive, sometimes you have to remove it from where it has always been to an area that will give it a better chance to survive. We are so distracted with the color of the leaves that we don't realize that the environment and what the root is having to overcome is the real problem. Don't let your trauma go unaddressed. We have to deal with the root, so that way our leaves or everything that we're trying to experience or go after can actually resemble God, which is what it's all about. This is good.
So I started to compare the costs. I started to think about everything that I loved and their consequences. So I thought about, okay, I'm gay. I think it's been clear that God don't like that. I done heard that all my life. Okay, that's not good. Oh, I really like getting drunk. Man, that's a sin too. Dang. I don't honor my parents. Man, Old Testament was very clear that that's not okay with God. Oh, goodness gracious, I'm a thief. Hell, wow. Like, I was just like, everything I loved was terrible. And what I saw was everything that I had affection for, everything that I enjoyed, everything that I did naturally, that at the end of the day, it wasn't worth it. So I started to have this conversation with God, and I was like, God, I hear what you're saying, you know, but I don't want to be straight. Like, that's just not something I want to do. And that disposition of heart that I had is typical, where if you meet those who are same-sex attracted, you will hear, if you preach Jesus, what they hear you say is be straight. When in reality, Jesus is not calling us to heterosexuality, he is calling us to holiness. But it's hard to hear the difference. Hear me, heterosexuality is not the goal per se. Holiness is the goal, because once I get to know Jesus, then he works out all the rest, right? I think sometimes people have become what I like to call heterosexual evangelists, where when talking to the LGBTQ community, they will present the gospel of marriage or the gospel of being straight as if that is the goal of this life. As if when we get to heaven, we will have marriage between man and woman. Marriage won't exist. What will exist is the lamb and the church. Will exist in the bridegroom and the bride. So we can't preach marriage. We need to preach Jesus. So what I came to see...
Let me tell you something that these leaders may not be saying. And that is that God is calling us to holiness. He says that I am a holy God and that my people should be a holy people. The only thing that he has called us, the only thing that he has ever called us to be is holy. God didn't call us to be Baptist or to be Catholic or to be a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon. No, he called us to holiness. And that's why the Spirit of God is called the Holy Spirit. Because God's Spirit is what is holy. God's Spirit is holy. Hebrews chapter 12 and I believe verse 15 said that without holiness, no one will see the Lord. Holiness is what we're called to. I love what she just said.
What I came to see was that God was ultimately calling me to himself. That God wanted me to know him. That God wanted me to love him. That God wanted me to serve him. So I told God in my bed, I'm like, man, what you called me to is hard. I had tried to be saved about 18 times, reading the little sinner's prayer on the back of the little books about heaven. And it just never seemed to work because no one had ever explained to me that salvation was a supernatural work of the Spirit of God, that I can change my clothes all day. I can change my friends all day. I can start listening to certain music, but that would not change my heart. That would not change my nature. That would not change my mind, that I needed the Spirit of God to do the work for me. And so I told God, I don't know how to do what you are calling me to do, but I know enough about you to know that you will help me. I had no idea that that was repentance because I didn't know that word existed. I had no idea that was faith because I didn't know that that word existed. But what had happened was I saw my sin rightly. I saw it as unworthy of my time. I saw it as unworthy of my attention. I saw it as worthless. I saw it as not good. I saw it as an idol. I saw it as a lie. All of my sin, hence. I saw it all for what it was, and I turned. But I didn't turn to self-righteousness. I didn't turn in on myself to think that I can make myself saved. What I did was I turned to Christ, seeing that only he could save me, only he could change me, only he could renew me, only he could sanctify me, only he could regenerate me, and I had no choice but to believe. Faith is not optional. God was not suggesting that I would repent and believe in his name. He was commanding it. So that's what I did, and God saved me. And I knew I was different the next day because I went to work. I used to work at Wendy's, so if y'all want the recipe for a junior bacon and the sour cream and child potato, holla at me afterwards. They do have real meat though, I'll let you know that. McDonald's, I can't vouch for them. Obviously I have a thing against McDonald's anyway. I was at work and this girl walked into the restaurant and I was behind the cash register, and she was pretty. And I remember looking at her in typical fashion. What I would have did 2 days prior would be to stare at her, lust after her, objectify her, and maybe stare at her long enough to see if she, was on the same page that I was on. But in my heart, I was aware of God for the first time. And it wasn't as if God was never sovereign before. It wasn't as if I didn't believe that he saw me when I was in sin. It was just that this time I cared. I cared about what God thought about my behavior. I had a reverence for him that I had never felt. My clothes were still the same. I still had my sports bra on and my boxers on, but this time I wanted to honor God. I think it's valuable to talk about temptation when talking about these discussions, because I believe some people in the church have propagated this kind of lie that to be set free from sin means to not be tempted by sin. So I want to kill that, because I've been in churches where they'll say, well, if God delivered you from that, you shouldn't be struggling with it. So if you're struggling with it, then you're obviously still that. That's still who you are. The truth of the matter is that can't be true considering Jesus. Considering that it says that he was tempted, yet without sin. And so now, if Jesus was tempted, yet didn't sin, then obviously temptation can't define deliverance. Then obviously temptation can't define my identity, but rather how I respond to it. And so being a believer means now that though I might be tempted, though I might still see beautiful women, though I might still want to lust after people, though I might still want to watch pornography, though I might still want to do things that are wicked in God's sight, now I have power.
I really hope that her testimony blessed you, because I really appreciated just how real she was. Because people do need to know that getting saved doesn't mean that all of your troubles will go away. In fact, you'll probably have more, because now you have to fight against the things that you used to give into. Because your desires don't just go away. They now become what you battle against. Yeah, there's some situations where people, for example, smoke cigarettes every day, but now no longer desire to. But for most, that's not the case. After getting saved, what's supposed to be changed is your heart and your mind, where we walk after his spirit rather than the flesh. When I first got saved, there was still a lot of sinful things that I desired to do. But as I matured in Christ, the battle became less and less of a problem. That's called growing from a babe to spiritually mature. As believers, we have to give more grace and more patience to others. Our focus can't always be on if you're living a homosexual lifestyle, then you're going to hell. Because the Bible also says that liars will go to hell. Those who steal will go to hell. And those who commit adultery will go to hell. There are other things, not just homosexuality, that can cause you to go to hell if you're living that lifestyle. It's all a choice. We have to be willing to put what He wants above what we desire. Because if we don't, we have chosen something temporary over the one who is eternal. I hope that you will choose Christ on today. He's worth it. I'm Jeremiah, and this has been another video from Spoken Word. Thank you so much for watching this video of Jackie Hill Perry with me, because I really believe that if you apply what she said to whatever your situation or your struggle is, you will overcome. And it all starts by going after the root first. Go back to where the trauma or the issue first started. And when you overcome that, the things that you struggle with today can't affect you any longer because you've already dealt with the root. Thank you. I hope that you be blessed. And I look forward to the next video with you, all right? Hey, be safe. This is Spoken Word.